If you have been waiting to get your hands on some Ag Chicks merch, now is the time to do so. All of the Ag Chicks merch will be on sale on the website if you use code AGCHICKS at checkout. All of the Ag Chicks merch, meaning hats and t-shirts and stickers, will be on sale to help you prep for the holidays and make sure that everyone has some Ag Chicks merch going into the new year. Kait Thornton is a fourth-generation apple and pear grower from Washington. She's built an audience of over 450,000 people across social media through educational videos around the agriculture she's involved in and the lifestyle that comes with it. She's finishing her marketing degree at Washington State University and plans to take that back into agriculture. After graduating, Kait plans to build her two businesses and work on the farm. She has built a fruit sales business, Kait's Crates, and is the co-founder of a social media marketing business, Ag Novo. She has recently gotten into public speaking and hopes to get more of the younger generation interested in agriculture through this. In her free time, she loves hiking, fishing, competitive rifle shooting, and working on her Ford pickups. Please help me welcome Kait to the Ag Chicks podcast. Hey y'all, this is Allie Spears, your host of the Ag Chicks podcast, where I cultivate connections with the women who are helping feed the world. All right, Kait, well, I am super excited to chat today. You, my friend, have a lot going on, and so I want to make sure we have time to cover everything and really kind of get to dive into all of the stuff that you've got going on and all the incredible things that you're doing. So why don't we start kind of from the beginning, if you're good with that? Why don't we start with talking about kind of your childhood and where you grew up and kind of where you come from?
Man, yeah. So this is I'm always doing this because I'm always meeting new people at college, but basically how I describe where I'm from is I'm from Tonasket, Washington, and it's the middle of nowhere. I always describe it as it's a town with no stoplight, about middle of Washington, but 20 minutes from Canada, so way up there. And I'm a fourth generation apple and pear grower, so grew up always around that growing season and harvest and all that comes with it.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm so excited because you're my first apple and pear farmer. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that. I am from Northern California, so very ag based, and there's definitely some orchards, but y'all definitely have the best apples. So I'm excited to chat with you.
Thank you. Yes, we try our best, but yeah, Northern California has definitely got a lot of ag, so I have a lot of respect for you there.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, just learning about the different types of ag, obviously, all over the United States, because places you would not think about being like so engulfed in agriculture, I mean, are, right? Like people don't think about the West Coast, but that's where the majority of our food comes from. So it's kind of crazy.
Absolutely. That's actually a huge point is like people are like, oh, you're from Washington, Space Needle. And I'm like, hold on. We've got a lot more going on than just Seattle. There's the whole eastern side of the state is very much so cattle, orcharding. We've got a lot of potatoes. I think we actually grow more potatoes than Idaho.
Oh, really?
Yep. And then we got a ton of blueberries, lot of different fruits and vegetables, and then of course cattle.
Yeah, y'all have a lot of feedlots up there as well. Kind of there's a river basin, and I can't think of the name of the river right now, but I know somebody from that area, and we had this similar conversation about just how much ag really is in Washington and in the West Coast in general that people don't think about. They think about, the Space Needle and all that, right?
Exactly.
Not so worried about where the food's coming from that they're enjoying, but gotta get a tourist side in at the Space Needle.
Exactly. But if you're ever in Washington, make your way over to the east side. I promise you won't regret it.
Well, and it looks like just from social media, like you guys live in such a beautiful place. Like it looks like you're just right kind of in the mountains. Is that accurate or?
Yeah, so it is kind of a unique area because I'm in a valley.
Okay.
And so I'm surrounded by mountains, but it's like 30 minutes and I got some awesome like snowmobiling, skiing, that type of country it's very rural. So my population in my town is about 1,200. My graduating class is 63. So I honestly think of it as God's country. And there's a reason my dad has traveled all over the world, literally, and has decided that this is his paradise. And we've built kind of an oasis for ourselves. And I love it because in Washington, if anyone's been, there's so many different terrains, and that's also what makes it great for agriculture is because there's so many different soil types. Um, but all the different terrains, like on my drive just from the farm to school, you're hitting, mountains, forests, valley, desert, alongside a river, and then through some of the best wheat country in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so crazy to me to think about just how diverse it can all be, right, in just one state. So
Mm-hmm.
it's so cool. But then you just mentioned school, right? You got the drive to school. So you are a student, and tell us a little bit about kind of what you are doing at school and where you're going to school and all that.
Okay. Well, everyone's going to think that I'm an ag major. Not the case. I'm actually a business major. I'm going into marketing. I'm finishing up my last semester at Washington State University. Go Cougs. Which is a great ag school. Started out as a majority ag school. But I figured I could be more beneficial my role in the industry by learning more of the business side and also just making connections in the business world because I do have like a wealth of access to agriculture based connections and stuff. So I figured, why not go into an area that I typically wouldn't be expected to be in, and I've totally enjoyed it. The Carson College, which is the business college at Washington State, is incredible. They've really they really back their students, especially alumni, and they've really made me feel welcome, even though I'm like a totally different persona than their typical student.
But I love that. And I think it's important, sometimes or oftentimes, I'm not going to say sometimes, oftentimes, we as people in agriculture kind of get stuck in our like echo chamber of ag. And so I think it's really important for individuals to kind of branch outside of that to learn obviously kind of what else is out there, but then also be able to bring some of those perspectives back to agriculture and really implement them in new ways to keep our industry relevant and kind of moving forward. So I commend you on that because that's not easy, especially not being or being from a small town and then kind of going into that world. That's I'm sure it was a little bit of an adjustment.
Well, I loved it because I'm a social butterfly, so I was kind of like, all right, I've grown up with the same people. Like anyone from a small town knows, like you're going K through 12 with the same people, which I love them all, but I was like, I'm excited to meet new people, and Washington State has people from like all over the world, all over the country, and I just kind of was like, I'm not gonna. I love to like challenge myself and put myself in like new situations, and so I would just like start talking to the random frat boys or like the sorority girls, or like I ended up being in a dorm with majority of student athletes. So I ended up living with two baseball players last year, and like just different scenarios instead of just sticking with the status quo. And of course I've got like all my ag and like more country type friends, but I also have become the token country friend for all the people that are from cities and stuff. So it's been a cool dynamic. I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. I when I moved to Texas to go to A&M, I didn't know a single person here, so I decided to join a sorority because I was like, I don't know how else to make friends at this point. And I was
Yes.
like, same thing. Like I was the token ag person in the sorority. So any questions about anything related to agriculture or any livestock, they came to me. Half the time I couldn't answer their questions about chickens or crazy things, but at least they felt like they could talk to somebody, I guess.
Absolutely. And even like I drive a 1995 Ford Power Stroke, and I have gotten many calls in the wintertime because I've got a winch on my pickup. And the folks from California, which no offense to you, but they like
No,
California
dang
people don't
Californians.
they don't know how to drive in the snow, bless their heart. And so I have to pull them out of the ditch quite a few times. But it's awesome, and I think it's like it's just been a fun experience. I never joined the sorority. I kind of wish I did, but I was on the fast track and graduating in 2.5 years instead of the typical 4. So
Okay, how the heck are you graduating in 2.5 years? That's insane.
I forget that not every state has this, but I there's the Running Start program. So I did two
Okay,
years of college in high
in
school.
high school.
It worked out well because it was like right during when COVID started. So I really didn't miss out on much of a high school experience, and I knocked 2 years out, which I would recommend for anyone who like knows the direction that they want to go. Otherwise, enjoy those first 2 years of college and just kind of immerse yourself in everything and figure out what you're passionate about. But I knew what I was passionate about since I was about 17. So
Awesome. So have you, I guess my next question is, after you graduate, so you're in your second year then?
this is my third year because I'm doing
Third year.
2.5 years.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. So when are you gonna graduate?
next month.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what are the post grad plans?
Oh my gosh, Ali, I keep getting asked this.
I know it's the worst question when you're in that phase of life and you're like, either you know and you're tired of telling people, or you're like, I don't know, okay, and that's okay, and I'm gonna figure it out, and I'll let everyone know when I figure it out.
well, I was convinced that I would just like right out the front door or right out the gate, I would just like get into a marketing firm or stay on like the sales and marketing side of the fruit industry because that is a huge part of our industry and where I
Right.
was kind of comfortable. But the trajectory of how my social media is going and connections I've made, and I've kind of built my own personal brand, which is awesome. And I want to continue to build that. Plus, I've got a business called Kate's Crates where I'm selling fruits around our community. And then I've also got another business that I started with a girl I met in Switzerland, and it's an ag based, well, it's a marketing company for ag based companies on the social media marketing side. And so I'm just like, I'm just going to continue to build those steady enough income. I am at 21 not supporting anyone really, so I don't need that 6 figs a year type salary. I want to enjoy my body being in good shape, being able to like have stamina. I want to travel, I want to experience new things. Like that's kind of where my passion is. But I've also been doing this stuff since I was 16. And so I want to enjoy being on the farm and like having some sort of, I don't know, consistency because I am here, there, and everywhere right now. And I love it, but it's going to run me ragged. And
Yes.
so long story short, I'm not taking a full-time job, but it's a full-time job being Kate.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's such a great way to say that because I totally get that. Totally get that. Yeah, I think the important thing, especially when you're young, is to do something that you're enjoying because we only get this time for a very short amount of time. And I think the point about, having an able body that can go and do the things that you want and taking advantage of those opportunities while you can is such an important thing to keep in mind. But I love that. I think that's such a cool approach. And I mean, if you're happy and you're enjoying what you're doing, then you're gonna win the lottery, so to say, because not very many people can say that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and like I think that we're conditioned always to be like, all right, you need to find a full-time job and you need to do this and you need to do that. Whereas I've grown up where my dad's always been the boss of himself, right? Being a farmer. And he's like, just find what you're passionate about and it'll lead you to the right way. And it sounds kind of like a cliche or a little bit cheesy, but it's so true. And if you are passionate and truly care about something, other people will recognize that and they'll want to help you get to wherever you want to be. And I found a lot of like positive and just success in following that, I don't know, ideology.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, another thing I can relate to, I guess, is when I realized what I wanted to do and kind of leaned
Mhm.
into that. It's crazy how many doors open that you just would have never even thought were
Yes.
out there.
Yes. Just keeping your like an open mind and not restricting yourself to one pathway. Like I mean, if any girls are listening to this or young people, it's like you're in your early 20s, you're in your 20s. There's nothing really holding you back. And people are a lot more forgiving of you when you're this age and making mistakes and so on and so forth. So it's just like full send it.
Yes, yeah, do it while you can. Yep,
Exactly.
yeah. Yep, do it while you got your responsibilities are lower, and um figuring out the things that you're passionate about, because ultimately, hopefully, people are able to figure that out and have a full happy life through that. But no, I think that's awesome. So I'm fully in support of your after grad plans. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
By ranchers for ranchers. Together, let's make ranching easier. Previously known as Cattle Vac Fox, Strayhorn has rebranded to better match their ability to push the envelope in creating innovative animal management products to serve the ranching community. Strayhorn is rooted in tradition and ranching legacy, but they believe in the opportunity of looking at things with a new perspective to drive the industry forward. Check out all of the things that Strayhorn has to offer you and your herd. But I do kind of want to talk a little bit about the apple industry, just because I think it's something people are not super familiar with. So let's kind of start. So obviously, like, you have an apple orchard, right? So what is kind of the production timeline of harvest and all that? Because I think you're in the middle of harvest still right now, aren't you? So what does that look like in terms of the timeline?
Well, we actually just wrapped up harvest, thank
Okay.
goodness. It was a tumultuous ending. It was just cold temperatures. But right now, so one thing about the apple industry, pear industry, tree fruit industry is it's very labor intensive. Like all of this fruit is still being picked by hand, and you've got pruning that's done by hand and all sorts of just manual labor. And I think it makes it special because it adds a certain energy to that crop. You know, it's not just a team of 5 people. We've got 60 guys working in our
Oh,
orchard.
wow.
And so we this last weekend we just threw a harvest party for our guys. We picked a record amount of bins. And now they're headed back to, a lot of the guys are contract workers, and so they're headed back to Mexico. And so now we get a little bit of off time, but off time means like you're winterizing your place and you're making sure that we one thing we do is like we put a lot of mouse poison out in the orchard, and just kind of get ready for that long winter that typically we have in north central Washington. And then in January is kind of when we'll have more guys starting to show up, come back from Mexico, and we start pruning, shaping our trees, getting ready to support, new growth in our orchard. And then you move into springtime, we got bloom. So all apples start out as flowers, if anyone didn't know. And so we got to make sure that we're protecting those bloom, because early spring, you have temperatures that can get below 32 degrees, and that can either damage fruit or eliminate fruit altogether. So we run big wind machines that stir up the air, bring hot air, warmer air around those blossoms, protect them. Then you move into the apple development, pear development, and that fruit starts to grow. And that's where we're constantly trying to throttle nutrients, pest management. We're also going through and we're hand thinning, and early in the like blossom time we're chemical thinning, which essentially means we're just burning off some of the flowers, because trees sometimes can produce more fruit than they probably should. And so we've got to make sure that that tree is well balanced and happy. And one thing that like fruit trees are known for is being biennial bearing. So one year they'll have a ton of fruit, and then the next year they'll have less fruit. And so as a farmer, you're trying to create consistency out of a lot of different variables. And so we're constantly just trying to make sure that that tree is going to be consistent, and also thinking about the next year while we're in the current season.
Yes. Okay. And that was kind of another question I had, just in terms of like seasons, right? So obviously the tree is not planted and it has fruit right away. So what's the
No.
kind of timeline, or I guess life of a tree, an apple tree. What does that look like in terms of like from planting it to being able to get fruit produced off of it?
No, great question, because we're like always trying to make that decision, especially if we got a new chunk of land and it hasn't been planted before. And we're like, okay, we got to think about, first of all, this tree is not going to start fully producing fruit if we plant it. It's not going to be in full production until about 7 years down the road.
Okay.
I mean, it starts producing fruit around 5 years or so, but full production not until 7 years. So you first of all have to make sure you're planting a variety that's going to make sense in the market. You got to make sure you're planting a variety that is going to make sense as far as your harvest timing. And then you also want to make sure that you're planting those trees in a spacing that makes sense, because each tree can have different what we call root stocks. So that's essentially, and I always put it in like diesel terms, that's essentially the horsepower that that tree is going to get. And so sometimes we have, what we try to do anymore is have dwarf root stocks. So it's a smaller engine essentially, and it's getting that tree a lot more horsepower in a smaller amount of space, versus you think about the typical apple tree. It's this big old thing and it's got this huge root system and stuff, but it doesn't make sense for commercial farming where you've got to put as much trees as you can and be as high efficiency as possible with that plot of land, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of how we approach that situation of planting new trees, because it is a very important decision, because you're thinking of it 7 years down the road.
Yeah, so just like you mentioned a minute ago, right? You're always thinking about now, but also the future too. So that's a lot. That's very different from other farming situations, I think, just because of the longevity of the planning process.
Yeah, the trial and error I think hits a lot harder sometimes for us versus like row crop. Sometimes you could try something different on row crop and you're like, oh, that hurt us this year, which is still like significant in itself, but you can always change next year. Versus
Mhm.
us, it's like you fully have to rip out tree systems, or you have to fully graft over, which is just cutting down the tree and gluing a new variety on top of that tree, which is still an investment. And you think about planting, you don't just plant a tree and let it sit there, you're maintaining it too. So any
Right.
chemicals, any nutrients, any manual labor, which if anyone doesn't know, Washington, we are paying about a 17.50 minimum wage. Plus
Wow.
now we have overtime in agriculture, which we never had before. So the stakes are a bit high for us.
Yeah, that's a lot. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, dang. Well, okay, so for me, right, to put it back in kind of a livestock comparison terms, I'm
Mhm.
thinking about this in terms of like row crops being kind of like the chicken industry, right, where it's fast and efficient, and then apple farming kind of more in terms of like cattle, where there's a nine
Yes.
month grow out period, or pregnancy and all that, and then it's takes longer to kind of see the end result to make changes. So
A
um,
great comparison. I'm going to start using that actually.
go for it. No, that's so cool. And so, do you guys have a certain variety that you kind of specialize in, or that you guys tend to use, or is it kind of just whatever fits at that point in time?
You asked some good questions. So it's important for us to just differentiate ourselves, because market conditions are different, weather conditions, again, biennial bearing. So we're always looking at, varieties that work well together. And so we've got about 10 different apple varieties, and then I think about 6 different pear varieties. And we're moving into more of those high dollar apple varieties that are, they're good for baking, but they're a lot of times for that fresh eating experience. People can grab a piece of fruit and have a consistent eating experience that is good every single time. And we're looking at, we've got varieties like the Cosmic Crisp, and we've got Sugar Bee Apple. And then there's some other newer varieties that we don't personally grow, but those are our like 2 more high dollar varieties that we're happy with right now, because they're, first of all, not as hard as like Honeycrisp for us to
Mm,
grow. Honeycrisp, everyone loves them, but they're a pain to grow because they have a lot of deficiencies. Um, and then also it's a pretty high yields crop. We get a lot of fruit on the tree, and And then the marketing side, which is what fascinates me, the marketing and sales side has done very well because with these varieties, a lot of times they are licensed. And so you can only have a certain amount of acreage planted in the whole state. And so that creates
Okay.
a controlled volume. And so we, you know, working with retailers and stuff, we can control the price a little bit better.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so the supply and demand aspect of the control there's a little bit more in your like you said, in your control. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. That's fascinating that
Right?
that's how that works.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not like as much of a commodity as like I'd say wheat or soybeans and stuff like that. Like you can actually think about you're raising this fruit for fresh consumption, and so there's a little more marketing that goes with that.
yeah, that's okay. Interesting. I did, like you said, I wouldn't have thought about that. So, so that's what you obviously you just mentioned that you're interested in that side of things.
Yeah.
And then kind of going along the lines of marketing and businesses and everything. So you have your Kate's Crates, which is that apples that you guys have grown, I'm assuming, and that you're marketing locally.
Yeah, I actually started out with apricots. We had a few trees that weren't gonna like they were just gonna drop. The fruit was, and Dad was like, when I was 16, he's like, you can sell it if you want to. He was kind of seeing what I was made of, you know.
Yeah.
And I totally fell in love with it because I decided as a Gen Z person, I was like, I'm gonna put instead of selling this fruit at a bulk price to a grocery store, move all of my fruit at once. I'm gonna spread out my selling season, and I'm just gonna post ads on Facebook Marketplace, get that price up a little bit, and then be able to get to know my community more because I'm hand delivering all of this fruit. I got to meet like so many new people. Um, really sharpened my social skills, right? Learned responsibility. So I started out with apricots, moved into apples, and I got some pears too. But yes, I'm majority apple sales.
Very cool. So is that how the social media stuff started for you, or what? How did that whole other journey kind of begin?
They kind of went hand in hand. So right around that time, 16, 17 years old, my mama just took off. My dad was like busy with the farm. We he had just gotten over it was a tumultuous time, I tell you what. He had just gotten through being in rehab for alcoholism, and so it was like a rocky time. And so I was like, all right, like I need to do something. And I kind of just threw myself into this fruit sales thing. And I had grown up on the farm, but I didn't have a ton of interest in what we were doing. I kind of was just like, we grow this fruit, it goes on a truck, and I don't really think about it again. And
Hmm.
I was like, as I would get a bin of fruit, and then I'm hand packing into these 25-pound boxes. And so you're handling a lot of fruit. And I start to ask questions, and I learned from my dad, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, not enough people know about this stuff. And I would get questions from my customers, and I'd have those like customer interactions. So I know what the consumer is thinking and wondering. And so I started to implement that into my videos and stuff. And I thought agriculture was already on top of the social media thing at 16 and 17, but come to find out that was not the case. So I was like, might as well just see what people think. And people loved it. And I was like, we do have a great story to tell. And it's kind of just snowballed from there.
Yeah. So what has been kind of your favorite part of sharing on social media? Like, has there been like, and maybe there are several things, but is there one moment where you're like, wow, this is pretty cool?
Yeah. I'll sometimes do live videos on like TikTok, and I love doing that because it feels like the most like one-on-one conversations I can have with
Yeah.
people. Um, and I get a lot of people that either comment or go in my lives and tell me, I think of you every time I'm in the produce section. And I'm like, that's honestly what we've been missing as an industry because I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. It's like agriculture's gotten bigger but smaller at the same time, right?
Hmm.
There's fewer touch points, there's fewer of those small farms that are, immersed in their communities, and that people have that sort of touch point that they think about every time that they're looking at, let's say beef, let's say carrots, potatoes, apples, whatever. They have some sort of an understanding typically because of those interactions that they've had with farmers. But as we move farther away from farming, you have people that don't really have those touch points and that sort of perspective to bring with them when they're purchasing something. So the fact that I've been able to, through social media, create that kind of touch point, and that people have carried that with them into a store and it's helped them make a decision when it comes to spending their dollar. That's incredible to me.
Yes. No, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of having touch points. I think, like you mentioned, right, we as agriculture have a great story. I just don't think we do a great job of telling it all the time.
Yep.
And so I think the more voices out there and the more that we can provide these interactions to general consumers, I think the bigger impact it will have, hopefully, like you said, on where they decide to spend their dollar and how they decide to spend their dollar. Because as the world gets crazier, that's going to become a more important thing for us in ag.
I totally agree. And are you still going to Texas A&M?
Yes, so I work here at Texas A&M full time as a staff member, but then I'm also working on my PhD in ag communication. So trying to figure that problem out a little bit, one step at a time. It's been something that I thought everyone would be talking about, and like how can we use social media and leverage that as agriculture, but they're really not. So it's been an interesting journey.
We're about to hit that curve. Just wait.
I know.
It's coming. But like I think that's awesome, and I thought I'd let you know that I will be at Texas A&M week after Thanksgiving. So
okay,
yeah.
well, let's connect. We need to connect for sure, because yeah, I'll be gone just the first couple days next week, but I'll be back Wednesday and here until December something. So
Perfect.
awesome.
I'm a little bit nervous. I'm talking to a bunch of like ag students down there about
Oh, really?
horticulture. And I mean, I can talk to like older folks all day, but my peers, holy cow, that's intimidating.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think that it's whenever I get asked to do speaking engagements for like students, I'm like, oh man, they're gonna think I'm like, oh gosh, this girl, she thinks she's something, right? She posts a few
They're
pictures on
gonna
social
judge us.
media. Yeah, 100%. I think it's way harder to talk to peer level audiences than older for sure.
I love it. No, but I'm excited. I want to I want to get a pulse for what younger people are thinking as far as ag, and Texas A&M is incredible when it comes to that front.
Well, I mean, I think that's the future, right? That's the future of our industry. So we need to engage younger generations in a way that connects with them and makes sense with them, but also helps to keep the industry moving forward. So I think by, you who are literally right in the thralls of it with them right now in terms of age and all the stuff that you're going through, what a better person to connect with for sure.
Well, I think it's a very unique time because I think in years past, it's always been a matter of seniority, right? Okay, you have X amount of years of experience. We'll listen to you over young buck over here. Well, anymore, it's like times have moved so fast that companies are scrambling and they are looking for people like you who understand social media and stuff. And they're looking for fresh ideas in young people who are bold and are seeing the world from a different perspective, because the world has changed so much even in the last 30 years. And so it's fun for young people because there is so much opportunity out there. We just have to make sure that we're confident enough to speak out and remember that, like, just because we think it's such a blatantly obvious thing, like I mentioned before, I thought agriculture was on top of telling our story. um but that's not the case, and that idea that you have might not have been thought about before, so continue to talk out about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is, I think the biggest thing I've learned just in the past 3 years when I started the podcast was, again, I liked social media, but I wasn't like obsessed with it by any means, or like on it even. Like I would post, once every 4 months, maybe. And
Right.
when I started the podcast and I realized how big of a deal it was, but then also just kind of like you mentioned, like I knew people were not super in touch with agriculture, but I didn't realize how much of a gap there was until I
Right?
kind of went down this whole journey. And it's so fascinating because there are, I think, the people that are out there and that are concerned about it are really doing a good job to try to, you know, increase the voices of ag, but we can't do it alone. We definitely need other people,
No.
and we need people of all different backgrounds, all different aspects of the agricultural industry, and people who know what they're talking about and who knows more about your operation than you. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yes. Totally agree, Allie.
well, as we kind of wrap up here today, because the time absolutely flew by, I just looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, we're already at that point. But as we wrap up, do you have any advice to anybody who maybe is wanting to get into agriculture, or even like start talking about agriculture on social media, just because you clearly have such a presence and voice on social media? Is there anything that you might say to somebody wanting to get involved in any facet that you are currently involved in?
Well, first of all, don't keep it to yourself, talk about it. One of the biggest things, if you come from like no agriculture whatsoever, but if you're also already grew up in agriculture, go to your local cafe, go about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, go hang out with the old timers. They'll love to have you hang out and just ask them questions. I kid you not. And then they'll have some sort of niece or nephew or son or daughter that is involved in agriculture in some facet. They'll link you up with them. It's about who you know. And that's something that I love about agriculture is a handshake still matters. So if you show up, show some interest, people, because this is a very, like, if you're not passionate about this industry, you're not going to make it. So you got very passionate people. And so if they recognize other passion, they're going to just absolutely back you and want to support you 100,000%. So talk about it is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, even as a high schooler, my dad used to always say, well, you just need to go ask. You just need to go ask. And I was like, no, I can't go ask that person. Like, I don't know them. And now looking back, like, I really wish I would have taken advantage and listened to my dad a few more times than I did, about just like really just putting yourself out there, because the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no, or I can't help you. And then like, okay, on to the next thing. So I think that's really important advice, especially because we live our lives so digitally right now that
Yep.
that actual conversation, I think, would amaze people at how far that can go.
110%. Totally agree. And I think people need to remember that, if you're passionate and if you're excited about it, you're going to probably turn around someone else's day, because sometimes it's hard when you're working in this industry. You can get a little bit of tunnel vision and it can be a little like daunting sometimes. You're like, okay, everything's changing so fast. But then when you come across someone who is just freshly passionate and just trying to get in the industry, it's like a breath of fresh air, honestly.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, totally agree. Well, Kait, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. If anybody is wanting to connect with you, what is a good way for them to do so?
All right. Well, of course, Instagram, that'll be Caitlin Jill Thornton. Then TikTok is Apple Girl Kate, and I always spell Kate, Kait. But then, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's my favorite social media, actually, and that's just Caitlin Thornton.
No, I agree. I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity for just a real conversation and a real connection. It's definitely growing, I think, for sure, too.
Yes.
Well, again, thank you so much for spending time with me, and hopefully we can connect when you're in College Station. And I
Yes.
look forward to continuing to watch everything kind of continue to grow for you and in this next phase of life for you.
I totally appreciate it, Allie. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Ag Chicks. Don't forget to follow along on social media at Ag Chicks for more agricultural related content, and also be sure to check out your favorite podcast gear from www.agchicks.net. We'll see you next time.